There are moments in human history that make us stop and wonder, can prayer really move the course of nations? Can beads whispered with trembling faith redirect the storms of war, or even hold back the tide of evil itself? It sounds impossible to the modern ear, accustomed to power being measured in weapons, armies, or political treaties. And yet, hidden within the corridors of time, there are stories, not often told, that testify to a force unseen but undeniable. Stories where the Rosary, which simple chain of beads cradled in the hands of the faithful, has silenced cannons, turned back invading fleets, and restored a peace that seemed utterly lost. This episode invites you into that mystery. It asks you to pause with me and reflect. Could the humble Rosary, so small, so unassuming, carry within it the power to alter the fate of the world? Picture a war-torn landscape. The air is thick with smoke and sorrow. Mothers clutch their children, not knowing if dawn will bring life or death. Soldiers march with heavy boots, their hearts weighed down with fear. Leaders sit at long tables, charting battles on maps, convinced that only strategy will determine who rises and who falls. And yet, somewhere, often unnoticed, old women kneel in dim chapels, children gather in circles, and entire villages clutch their rosaries, pleading with heaven. Their voices may be small, but in heaven's courts, they resound louder than thunder. History whispers that the Rosary is not merely a prayer, it is a weapon of peace, sharper than any sword, more enduring than any fortress. Before we journey into one of these miraculous stories, let us linger here in this moment of wonder. The Rosary, for many, is a personal devotion, a rhythm of comfort before bed, a gentle background prayer in daily life. But what if I told you it has also been a prayer that halted wars, shifted the destiny of nations, and left generals baffled as to why their victories crumbled into dust? What if I told you that faith, when embodied in this simple prayer, has written chapters in history that textbooks rarely highlight, but heaven remembers? Imagine yourself holding a rosary now. Feel its weight. It is light, almost fragile, yet every bead carries a mystery. Every prayer links your heart to divine power. And then imagine this small chain magnified by thousands, tens of thousands, even millions, of hands praying in unison. A great wave of petition rising to the throne of God, the light of heaven meeting the shadows of war. This is the Rosary in its truest form, a spiritual army invisible to the eye, yet overwhelming in strength. When we ask, can a simple prayer really stop wars? We are not asking an abstract question. We are opening a door to testimonies etched into human memory. Battles turned, invasions halted, leaders perplexed. And always at the center, the humble beads lifted heavenward with faith. Think of it, wars are born of pride, greed, fear, and hatred. They roar with power, with violence. But prayer, especially the Rosary, flows from humility, love, and trust in God. What seems weak in the eyes of the world is precisely what heaven delights to use. It is the paradox of the gospel: the lowly are lifted up, the meek inherit the earth, and the child in the manger confounds kings. So too does the Rosary, whispered in the trembling night, dismantle powers that boast of their strength. In this episode, we will walk together into one such forgotten miracle of history. We will step into a moment when war was imminent, when the horizon was dark with the threat of conquest, and when victory seemed impossible. But instead of despair, people turned to Mary. They did not reach for swords or alliances, but for their rosaries. And what happened next was so astonishing, so undeniable, that history itself could only bow its head in wonder. But before we arrive there, before we tell that story in full, I want to invite you into prayer right now. Because this is not only history, this is your life. Maybe your war is not fought with armies, but in your home, in your heart, or in your family. Maybe your battlefield is anxiety or fear or division that feels insurmountable. The same question lingers for you: can a simple prayer really stop wars, your wars? I invite you, as you listen, do not remain a spectator. Reach for your rosary if you have one. Feel the beads between your fingers. Close your eyes and whisper, Mary, Mother of Peace, teach me how to pray with faith, because the miracle we are about to uncover is not just for then. It is for now. It is for you. In the next movement, we will step into one of the most astonishing moments in human history, a story almost too marvelous to believe, where the Rosary was the difference between devastation and deliverance. But for now, hold this truth in your heart. The world may scoff, but heaven smiles on the humble who pray. And prayer, when it rises with trust, can indeed stop wars. Let us travel back to the year 1571. The world was trembling. The powerful Ottoman fleet, vast and seemingly invincible, was advancing to dominate Christian Europe. City after city had fallen under its shadow, and the Mediterranean, once a cradle of life and trade, had become a sea of fear. In that time, it seemed only a matter of weeks before the great cross of Christendom would bow before the crescent. Kings hesitated, alliances faltered, and fear grew heavy in the hearts of ordinary men and women. What hope could there be against such overwhelming force? But while soldiers and generals prepared their defenses, something far more powerful stirred across the Christian world. Pope Pius V, a Dominican friar clothed in white, understood what was at stake. He saw with the eyes of faith that this battle was not only of ships and cannons, but of heaven and hell. And so he did what seemed unthinkable to the mighty. He called the entire church, not just soldiers, not just leaders, but everyone, to pray the Rosary. Imagine the scene. Across Italy, Spain, and beyond, churches filled. Poor farmers set down their tools. Children knelt beside their mothers. Sailors clutched their beads as tightly as their swords. In every corner of Europe, rosaries clicked softly, like a heartbeat of hope rising to heaven. It was not an army of thousands, but an army of millions, united not by weapons, but by prayer. Now picture the morning of October 7, 1571. The waters of Lepanto churned as the Christian fleet, outnumbered and outmatched, faced the Ottomans. The sky was heavy with smoke, the waves with blood. The roar of cannons split the air. Humanly speaking, the Christian fleet should have been crushed, and yet something unseen moved across the waters. Sailors testified later that it felt as though the winds themselves had shifted. A strange, sudden change tilted the battle in favor of the vastly smaller Christian fleet. The Ottoman armada, sure of their dominance, fell into chaos. By the day's end, against all odds, the Christian fleet had won a victory so decisive that Europe itself was saved from conquest. The impossible had happened. And in Rome, Pope Pius V, hundreds of miles away with no messenger near, was seen rising from prayer, tears in his eyes, declaring that the Christian fleet had been victorious. How did he know? He said he had seen it in a vision. Heaven had answered. The Rosary had turned back the tide of war. To mark this miracle, the Pope declared October 7th the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, later renamed the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. And from that day forward, the Rosary was not just seen as a private devotion, but as a mighty shield, a weapon of peace that could defend nations as surely as it could console hearts. Pause here. Let that sink in. Entire civilizations, their destiny hanging by a thread, were preserved not by sheer force, but by prayer. The Rosary prayed by countless hands, whispered in faith, lifted with tears. And if the Rosary could shift the course of history in 1571, what might it do in your own life, in your own battles? The lesson is not merely historical, it is personal. The same Mary who interceded at Lepanto intercedes for you today. The same Rosary that calmed the storm of war can calm the storms of your heart. Perhaps your war is not fought on the sea, but in the silence of your room, against despair, fear, or broken relationships. Do not underestimate the power of a humble Hail Mary, for heaven does not measure by size, by noise, or by force. Heaven measures by faith. As we move deeper into this story, I want you to imagine your own battles laid at Mary's feet. What enemy looms large in your life? What waves crash against your heart? Just as in 1571, It may seem impossible. The odds may seem overwhelming. But remember the sailors of Lepanto. Remember the children kneeling in chapels. Remember the Pope who saw victory through prayer. And then remember this truth: the Rosary changes history, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The question is, will you let it change yours? Centuries passed after Lepanto. Wars came and went. Empires rose and fell. But the Rosary remained, a quiet chain of beads binding heaven to earth. And again, in the 20th century, when the world trembled under the shadow of unimaginable destruction, this same prayer proved to be more powerful than fire itself. Let us step into the year 1945. The Second World War was drawing to its bitter end. The cities of Japan lay in ruins. And then came August, the month when humanity unleashed its deadliest weapon. In Hiroshima, the first atomic bomb fell from the sky like a second sun. In an instant, over 100,000 souls were lost. Entire neighborhoods disappeared into flame and ash. Doctors spoke of survivors with burned flesh and poisoned lungs. No corner of the city was untouched, and yet, amidst this ocean of destruction, stood a small, simple house. It belonged to 8 Jesuit priests. They were not wealthy men. They had no armor, no shield, no secret escape. What they did have was a daily habit. They prayed the Rosary together every single day, entrusting their lives and their mission to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. When the bomb fell, everything around them was destroyed. Windows shattered, walls crumbled, fires consumed entire districts. But their house, just a few blocks from the center of the blast, remained standing. Not only that, every priest inside survived unharmed. No radiation sickness, no burns, no long-term illness. Doctors could not explain it. Scientists studied it, but the priests themselves gave the only answer that made sense. We were living the message of Fatima. We prayed the Rosary every day. Think about that. Fire that melted steel and leveled buildings could not touch them. Radiation that poisoned thousands could not harm them. They lived on to tell their story for decades, a living testimony that the Rosary is not just a string of beads, but a fortress of grace. And this was not the first time. Only 10 years later, in 1955, another miracle unfolded, this time in Austria. The nation had been occupied by Soviet forces after the war. Many believed they would never leave. The world expected Austria to become another captive land behind the Iron Curtain. But one priest, Father Petrus Pavlicek, began a movement. His weapon, not protests, not guns, not politics. Instead, he gathered thousands upon thousands of Austrians to pray the Rosary for peace, day after day, year after year. The Soviets were powerful. The Cold War was at its peak. And yet, in May 1955, to the astonishment of the entire world, the Soviet forces simply packed up and left. No bloodshed, no battles. Austria was free, and to this day, historians cannot fully explain why. But the faithful knew the answer. The Rosary had once again stopped war without a single bullet fired. Do you see the thread? From Lepanto in 1571, to Hiroshima in 1945, to Austria in 1955, the Rosary has shown itself not as a quaint devotion for the weak, but as a spiritual weapon capable of moving history itself. What canons could not do, what treaties could not achieve, prayer accomplished. And now I ask you, what battles lie before you? They may not be fought with bombs or tanks, but perhaps with fear, with anxiety, with brokenness in your family, with temptations that feel impossible to defeat. These are your wars, and just as Mary's Rosary turned the tide at Lepanto, shielded Jesuit priests from fire, and liberated an entire nation, it can also bring victory in your life. Never think your Rosary is too small. Never think your prayer is too weak. The beads you hold may seem simple, but in the eyes of heaven, they are chains of light that bind evil and release grace. The devil himself fears it because he knows its power to protect, to heal, and to save. So when you take your Rosary tonight, remember Hiroshima. Remember Austria. Remember the millions who prayed at Lepanto. You are not alone. You are part of an unbroken chain across centuries, an army of the faithful who have discovered that even in the darkest hour, Heaven hears, because prayer does not only change hearts, it changes history. It is easy to hear stories of Lepanto, Hiroshima or Austria and think, those are great miracles of the past. But what about me? What about my life, my fears, my battles? And this is where the Rosary reveals itself not just as a historical weapon, but as a personal lifeline. Because the truth is, every soul fights wars. Not all of them make headlines. Not all of them involve armies or explosions. But the battlefield of the human heart is real, and its wounds are no less painful. Some of you listening right now are fighting the war of anxiety, a relentless enemy that creeps into the mind with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios, suffocating your peace. Others are facing the war of loneliness, a silence that feels unbearable, where it seems no one sees or cares. For some, it is the war of family conflict, broken relationships, words that cannot be taken back, a sense of separation that cuts deeper than any sword. Still others fight against temptation, addictions, and sin, where the struggle is daily, exhausting, and it seems like you are always on the losing side. These are the wars within, and often they feel unwinnable. But here is the miracle, the same Rosary that shielded priests from fire, that disarmed armies, that broke iron chains of oppression. This same Rosary can bring peace into the middle of your personal war. When you pray it with faith, bead after bead, mystery after mystery, something changes. Maybe your circumstances do not shift overnight. Maybe the storm outside continues to rage. But within you, in the depths of your soul, a calm begins to take root. A strength you did not know you had risen. And the fear, though still whispering, no longer holds power over you. Think of Jesus in the boat with his disciples. A storm surrounded them, waves crashing, wind howling. They panicked, certain they were going to die. But there was Christ, sleeping, at peace. Why? Because he was not afraid of the storm. When they finally woke him, he stood, stretched out his hand, and spoke 3 simple words: "Peace, be still," and the winds obeyed. When you pray the Rosary, it is as though those words echo across your own storm. Peace, be still. Fear cannot dominate forever. Anxiety cannot hold its grip. Mary leads us to her Son, who calms storms, not only in the seas, but in hearts. The Rosary works on us like this. The rhythm of the Hail Mary slows our breathing, quiets our racing thoughts, and anchors us in something greater than ourselves. The mysteries lift our gaze from our problems to the saving acts of Christ, from the crib of Bethlehem to the cross of Calvary, from the empty tomb to the glory of heaven. We begin to see that if God could bring victory in those great mysteries, he can also bring victory in our own. And Mary, our mother, walks with us through it all. She knows what it is to feel fear. When Simeon foretold that a sword would pierce her heart, when she lost the boy Jesus in Jerusalem, when she stood beneath the cross, yet in all of it, she never surrendered to despair. She held fast to God's promises. That is why she is the perfect companion for us when we are afraid. She whispers what she has always whispered: do whatever he tells you. Imagine her right now, standing beside you, wrapping you in her mantle. Picture her handing you the Rosary, bead by bead, as though saying, "Child, hold this weapon of peace. Pray, and you will not fight alone. Pray, and heaven will fight for you." The wars of the world may seem overwhelming. The wars within may feel crushing. But through the Rosary, you discover a truth that the devil has always feared. Victory belongs not to fear, not to chaos, not to despair, but to those who trust in the Lord and call upon him with faith. So when you feel the anxiety rise, take up your Rosary. When loneliness surrounds you, take up your Rosary. When the darkness of temptation presses in, take up your Rosary. The beads are not only reminders of prayer, they are chains of grace that link you to heaven itself. This is why saints have said again and again that the Rosary has saved their lives, not just once, but daily. It is not about praying perfectly. It is about showing up, holding on, and letting God fight the battle through you. The world has its weapons, but heaven has given us one that cannot be outmatched, a crown of roses. placed in the hands of every believer who dares to trust that something so simple can be so powerful. Beloved friend, we have walked together through stories of history, battles turned by prayer, nations delivered by the Rosary, ordinary people shielded by extraordinary grace. We have spoken of the wars of nations and the wars within. Now comes the question that every soul must answer. Will you take up the weapon heaven has placed in your hands? The Rosary is not a relic to admire from afar, is not a superstition, nor is it simply a Catholic tradition. It is a living chain stretching from Mary's hand to yours, from heaven's throne into the storms of earth. Every bead you touch is like an arrow of light piercing the darkness. Every mystery you meditate upon is like a fortress for your soul. Every Hail Mary is like a heartbeat of heaven echoing within your chest. Think of it. When you pray the Rosary, you are not alone. You join an army, millions across the world, countless saints in heaven, and Mary herself interceding for you before the face of God. You stand in a battle line that stretches through centuries, from Lepanto to Fatima, from Hiroshima to today, and your voice adds power to that chorus of prayer. The devil fears this. He fears a soul who prays. He fears a heart that clings to Mary. He fears the Rosary because he knows that with every Ave Maria, his grip on this world loosens. He knows that through this prayer, Jesus reigns more fully in human hearts. But what about you? Maybe you've struggled to pray the Rosary consistently. Maybe it feels repetitive, or you've tried and grown distracted. Hear this truth. Heaven is not measuring your perfection. Mary is not counting your stumbles. She is a mother. She only asks for your presence, your willingness, your desire to stay close. Each prayer, no matter how distracted, is still a rose placed in her hands. And she, in turn, arranges those roses into a crown for Christ, her Son, offered in love on your behalf. And here is the secret. The Rosary is not just for the holy. It is not only for monks, nuns, or saints in the making. It is for the sinner, the struggler, the broken, and the fearful. It is for you exactly as you are. If you are anxious, pray the Rosary. If you are weary, pray the Rosary. If you are full of doubts, pray the Rosary. The very act of picking it up is already a victory, because it means you are refusing to let the enemy silence you. My dear friend, tonight, as the world spins on, as conflicts rage in distant lands, as storms rumble in our own hearts, heaven bends low with an invitation. Take up your beads, pray, step into the stream of miracles that has not ceased since the first Hail Mary was spoken. Picture yourself now holding the Rosary. Feel the weight of it, the cool beads between your fingers. Imagine Mary standing beside you, quiet but strong, her gaze full of love, her mantle wrapping you in safety. Hear her gentle voice. Do not be afraid, my child. Together we will pray. Together we will win. Will you say yes? Because here is the truth, the same truth history has testified to again and again. A simple prayer can change the course of wars. And not only the wars of nations, but the wars raging in your own soul. The Rosary is the weapon heaven has entrusted to us. And if we dare to believe, if we dare to pray, if we dare to pick up those beads with faith, nothing is impossible. So let us begin again. Let this moment mark a turning point in your journey. Do not wait for the perfect time, or for your life to feel less busy, or for distractions to disappear. Begin tonight. Begin now. Whisper your first Hail Mary. Allow your heart to rest in the rhythm of prayer. Let heaven take care of the rest. And one day, when the story of your life is told, may it be said of you what was said of those who prayed at Lepanto, at Fatima, at Hiroshima, that you too fought with the weapon of the Rosary, and by it you found peace, strength, and victory. Pray the Rosary every day. This was the plea of Mary at Fatima, and it echoes now across centuries directly into your heart. Will you answer? Will you join the unbroken chain of warriors of prayer? The invitation is yours. The miracle is waiting. Take up your Rosary, beloved, tonight, tomorrow, always, and discover for yourself why heaven has never stopped working wonders through this simple prayer.